Hey guys, what's up? This is Dan, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to create this anisotropic light sweep effect. You can see if I scrub this, as this emblem sort of rotates, we get these cool looking light sweeps along the edges. So let's hop into Cinema 4D and take a look at how that's created. So I already went ahead and created sort of this rim thing. I'm not going to go through and, show you how to light the entire thing because this is only really focusing on this specific effect. And I went ahead and separated the outer rim with sort of the inner area because you can see how in this example the outer is green and the inner is sort of this bluish green. And I already separated that out into two materials. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my content browser and, I'm just going to drop in one of our soft boxes. Now this step is kind of optional, but I like to use the soft box because it's a lot faster. Just to sort of block in my really quick basic lighting here. This effect is very dependent on both your lights and your shader. So this is going to be sort of my key, and then we're going to drop in a bunch of spec lights. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the inner material, which is sort of this inner blue. And the secret to getting this nice anisotropic effect is actually quite simple. Under color, all you have to do is go to effects and drop in a Loomis shader. And Loomis is this is a pretty cool shader. What this does is it basically gives you several sort of specular layers that you can combine to create different effects. But in addition, it also gives you an option for anisotropy. And if I turn that on, now you can see it reflects that in my material preview. So if I render now, you can see right away, boom, we're already getting it. So I did a little bit of playing around, and depending on what your scene is and what sort of effect you're after, you can see that there's quite a few different projection modes. For this particular example, to get the effect that we're after, actually, does that work? It kind of works actually. Sometimes, if you have the wrong projection for your object, you'll get some kind of weird results. So you just need to play around with these and get, the effect you're after. I found for this particular example that shrink wrap actually worked really well. So if I render, you can see that we're getting exactly what we're after. Okay, cool. So, right there, that's pretty much the gist of it. But the next thing we can do is we can go in and we can actually fool around with the specular layers to sort of refine this effect. So first of all, I don't want this to be gray. You can see that when we dropped in our Loomis shader, that sort of overtook the entire color channel. So if I go in here and I change the color, I'm just going to make this that kind of dark blue. So now we've got that color. Another thing is, I'm not really digging how this specular hit is just pure white. You can see here that the specular hits are kind of this, sort of a lighter bluish green. So to change that, what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the specular layers and we're just going to alter that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to make this one more bluish. This one kind of a bluish green. And the cool thing about this shader is it gives you quite a bit of control over the exact look you want. So specular 1 is, your brightest hot spot. So you can make that pure white if you wanted something to look, really ultra bright and reflective, I guess. And then specular 2 is kind of like the middle. You can see that it sort of fades off here. And then specular 3 is sort of the more diffused, very soft sort of specular. Now, Another thing is you can see in this example that these anisotropic light hits are quite a bit larger than what you're seeing here. And the way we can change that is very simple. If we go under anisotropy and just change the scale, and I'm going to make this like, I don't know, how about 300? That's going to really make that a lot bigger. Or, actually, did that even do anything? Let me make this really crazy and see how much of a difference that makes. Okay, so you can see that didn't really do too much. Now, a lot of this stuff is kind of, trial and error. So the next thing I might do is go under specular. And again, you have a ton of control over these things. So if you want a bigger sort of specular hit, what I could do then is I could just go under size for specular 1. And you can see this is really tiny. And I could make this maybe 10. And you can see how that reflected there. Okay, so now we have that really big, kind of nice looking specular hit. I think I might increase the size of all of these, just to give it that nice fall off. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. One thing to be aware of is with this effect, you get this sort of weird aliasing issue sometimes. So you're going to need to go into your settings and bump up your geometry, your anti-aliasing from geometry to best. So now if I render this again, this is going to take a fair amount longer to render, but this is going to give us really smooth results. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn down the size to maybe 3. And if I go under anisotropy, what I can do maybe is increase the roughness X to maybe 1000. And what this should do is kind of make the specular longer, but at the same time give me those really fine lines still, so that they're not too big and ugly. Yeah, okay, that's looking pretty cool. So once you have a result you like, generally what I like to do is kind of block in my lighting, get the basic lighting set up, and then from there I like to really get into the nitty-gritty and position spec lights exactly where I want them. So I've got this light, and you can see that I'm not really getting any feedback here. What I usually like to do, just so I can get quick feedback and decide where to place my lights, is just tick on specular and turn down the width and turn up the inner width, and now you can see exactly where that spec hit is going to take place. For some reason, Loomis doesn't show up in the viewport. I guess you can't really render the anisotropic effect in the viewport, but specular does work. So wherever you see this light hit, this is where the Loomis is going to happen. So maybe I want a light hit, maybe right here. And if I tick off specular again and render, you'll see we get just what we were after. And I'm going to go in and tick on shadows maybe. And, it's looking pretty rough, but I'll leave that to you to sort of fool around with. Now, what we can do from here is we can hold Control and duplicate the inner material we just created. And just change this color to, that green that we were after. And I'm just going to hold Alt, and I'm just going to replace the outer material. So now we get the same effect between the two. Obviously that isn't quite right. We're going to need to change the specular color over to green. And with a little bit of tweaking, now we're kind of getting a little bit closer to what we were after. So now we can really go in and refine things and control, where specifically we want our spec hits. So I can change the fall off to inverse squared and really, really bring this in and bring it close so that this will only affect the very specific area that I want it to affect. In fact, you can see that's actually pretty subtle, so maybe I increase that. Give it another quick render. And now you can see we're kind of getting a much nicer effect that isn't way too over the top. So I can move these around, maybe move this one back a little bit. And, that's it's actually looking pretty good. Not too bad. Let's see here. Is there anything else to explain? Now, kind of another sort of cool thing about this is this, again, takes over the color channel. So, if you think about it, shader is kind of your color. One thing that I like to do is I like a really sharp contrast between, the basic color channel or the general diffuse in the spec. So what I like to do is go into the shader, and the illumination actually controls how much diffuse you get. So I like to really drop this low, to 20 or so. So now, maybe I'll make that one, yep. So now if I render, again, you can see now we're getting a really cool contrast effect. And this is going to need a little bit of a fill light now. So I'll pull out a round softbox here. And this is very quick. In the other example that I showed you, I put a lot of time into making it just right. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this one down, and I'm just going to really crank up the radius just so that I get a very, a nice overall fill. And I'm just going to change the shadow type to soft. So now if I render again, we should be getting a little bit more of, some extra light in there. That actually looks bad, so I'll just delete that. Okay, cool. So now, I guess the final thing is if we wanted to rotate this, we could. So if I go in here and, let's see, I keyframe the heading to 360 degrees. Keyframe that. Now it's going to rotate. And what I'll do is I'll make a quick preview for you guys so that you can see what happens. Okay, so now that that's done, let me quickly play this. And, that looks pretty cool. You can see, though, as it rotates, it sort of gets completely just black. And obviously that's because we don't have enough light. So what you need to do is, obviously, position more lights around the scene. So if I just take these lights and, just drag those behind. And I'm also going to take another softbox. And what I'm basically doing here is just completely copying this light setup except for the back. And this should look pretty good because it's not going to be totally over the top, like blowing everything out, but we'll get some nice light coverage here. So if I go back over here and render, looking good. Obviously I'm going to hide this softbox here. Okay, so I'm going to render this again, and let's see what we get. Okay, so let's take a look. I mean, it's still a little bit rough, but not bad. Pretty good, pretty good. I'll leave it up to you to fool around with this further and get exactly the look you're after. So, I guess that's about it. Thanks for watching, guys.